Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about the occurrence of jellyfish blooms and how they may affect oceanic ecosystems and coastal communities in the future. Jellyfish blooms are often seen as the harbingers of climate change and are increasing influence in the environment. Through this presentation, I hope to demonstrate why this may be true, but the reality may be less definite than some news stories may indicate. So let's start with the big picture. Here's a map of some of the events that are caused by jellyfish blooms around the world. Although we have disruptive occurrences of jellyfish blooms all over the globe here, many of the events reported by the media in the past few decades have been concentrated in areas of East Asia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. The big question here is, how do locally observed jellyfish blooms fit in the larger picture of whether jellyfish are actually taking over our oceans? Jellyfish is a general term that is loosely defined as a gelatinous invertebrate animal. For the purpose of evaluating blooms, we will define the jellyfish as the Medusae within the family of Cnidaria, as seen in our cover slide and this top image, and stenophores, otherwise known as comb jellies, seen on the bottom. Stenophores are included, although they are in a different family, because they pose similar issues when looking at blooms. Jellyfish predominantly prey on zooplankton, fish eggs, and fish larvae, but also have been known to eat crustaceans and other jellies. Some animals that eat jellies include turtles, tuna, sharks, sunfish, penguins, and spadefish. Jellyfish populations are controlled mainly in a bottom-up fashion in regards to trophic interactions. This means that their abundances are mostly a result of food sources and the conditions conducive to food sources rather than predation. This is going to be the most important slide to understanding the mechanisms behind jellyfish blooms and why we sometimes see such large densities of them in events that we saw on the second slide. This diagram shows how jellies can both reproduce sexually by budding in their polyp form, asexually by budding in their polyp form, or sexually by releasing sperm and eggs in their medusa form on the top. Due to the life cycle of jellyfish, populations are boom or bust, demonstrating a cyclical pattern where most blooms happen only once a year. The polyp phase is where jellyfish can take advantage of favorable conditions and bud off many medusae. Although comb jellies and some cnidaria don't have a polyp phase, the biggest takeaway is that they are all also opportunistic and explosive when they do reproduce. This type of adaptability is what gives them an advantage in certain situations compared to other marine life forms. What are blooms? Now that we know the jellyfish life cycle, we can probably infer that blooms are where a large amount of jellyfish moves from a sessile polyp phase to a fully grown medusa in favorable conditions. Fossil records show that this type of event has occurred for hundreds of millions of years, so it is not a recent phenomenon. In the first slide, we saw that these blooms can cause disruptions in coastal environments. Pictured here on the right, we have an image showing the Nomura's jellyfish that sank a trawler in Japan in 2007 when fishermen were trying to haul nets up onto a boat. These specific jellyfish species can grow to be 6 feet in diameter and upwards of 400 pounds per individual. Obviously, we can see that blooms are a conspicuous occurrence that has implications that go past just sinking vessels. So we'll discuss the impacts of blooms towards the end of this presentation. The main focus of many people's discussion of jellyfish is how human activity has led to the increase in the occurrence and severity of blooms. Some of the proposed influences are as follows. Eutrophication. As we know, eutrophication is caused by an influx of nutrients that can occur from runoff or, in this example, byproducts of aquaculture. This can lead to increased populations of phytoplankton and zooplankton and subsequent anoxic environment that jellyfish are more adaptable to compared to other fish. Overfishing. Overfishing can reduce the competition and predation towards jellyfish population and subsequently lead to an increase in abundance. Habitat modification. The polyp phase of the jellyfish depends on having a hard surface to develop on. Piers, aquaculture structures, and other man-made objects create ideal surfaces on which polyps can develop and create blooms. Translocation. The movement of jellyfish via ballast tanks of ships can bring invasive jellies to areas where they can create blooms. Other possible factors that may affect jellyfish blooms are salinity changes, warming of the oceans, and warm water discharge from power plants. So how real is this problem? I think it's important to mention that some of the perceived increases in blooms and bloom severity can be attributed to an increase in human presence in coastal habitats. Also, media coverage has made us increasingly aware that this may be an issue, but looking at decadal scale comparisons, the changes might not be as conclusive as one might think. Here's a graphic aggregating data from 45 large marine ecosystems from the 1950s to the 2000s. The authors found that there are increases in jellyfish abundance in 62% of the areas that they analyzed, shown by the red and orange colors. There were decreases in 7%, shown by blue, and stable and variable abundances in 31% of the areas, shown in green. This isn't the whole story, though. Jellyfish populations may go through larger decade-scale fluctuations. Because historical data on jellyfish abundance is relatively sparse, another study notes that these trends cannot be conclusively said to be anomalous to these larger fluctuations. Knowing that jellyfish are not supermobile animals, inferences can be made on how oceanographic processes might affect their populations. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, jellies are controlled mainly by food availability and consequently by water temperatures. Large-scale processes such as the El Niño Southern Oscillation have been correlated with jellyfish abundances, especially in areas such as the west coast of South America. Other trends such as the Pacific Decadal Oscillation seen in the top image, which is closely related to the ENSO, can control population in other areas. As students of oceanography, we can predict that ocean currents will also have an effect on productivity. Warm water currents like the Gulf Stream can facilitate jellyfish blooms all over the UK. Thinking on this large scale, climate change can play a role in the future. Circulation and stratification of water in our ocean basins will be influenced by shifts in sea surface temperature and other atmospheric processes that we have learned about in this course. The connection between abiotic factors of our oceans and jellyfish is not as straightforward as one might think, though. One study from the Bering Sea near Alaska shows that warming water, one of the proposed causes of jellyfish blooms, may not necessarily increase the likelihood of blooms. In the graphic on the right, jellyfish abundance based on trawling surveys can be seen in red, indicating high abundance. Years of high abundance indicated by panels B and C from 1990 to 2000 were seen when ocean temperatures were lower compared to increasing temperatures and decreasing abundances in panel D, starting in 2001. The authors of this study hypothesized that seasonal shifts in water stratification and other environmental effects can cause regime shifts in marine species. So how about areas that are closer to the coast? We might expect that some influences of human activity may be more prevalent there. Some research out there indicates that this is likely true. Correlations between aquaculture and eutrophication can be linked to jellyfish population explosions in places like Taiwan and Japan. Another example of blooms being linked to human factors include invasives, ctenophores being introduced into the Black Sea via ballast tanks. What this means is that blooms cannot be blamed on one singular cause. Usually, the dynamics of populations are more nuanced than that. There's likely a litany of factors that influence abundances. Unfortunately, the exact nature of these relationships is poorly characterized. What can we expect as we see more and more human population, as more and more of the human population occupies the coastline? Well, there are a lot of economic impacts attributed to jellyfish outbreaks. They can lead to beach closures to minimize occurrences of stings to tourists and locals. Some stings can be particularly painful and sometimes deadly in the case of box jellies. Also, jellyfish blooms can decrease yield of commercial fisheries and farm fish by killing fish, destroying nets, and fouling pens. Another observed effect of blooms comes in the form of clogged intakes at coastal power plants and desalination plants. Here on the right, we see jellyfish being disposed of after being cleared from the power station in Israel. Not everything about jellyfish is bad, however. There are possible uses in drugs for osteoarthritis in areas of Asia, people eat jellyfish. Nevertheless, it is apparent that there is a strong correlation between blooms and human activity. What does this mean for the environment and ecosystems that experience jellyfish blooms? Outside of just the effects of humans, we can see that shifts in marine trophic paradigms may occur if populations of jellies increase in the future. As we learned earlier, jellyfish towards the bottom of the trophic structure and can serve as an indicator for the health of primary producers and primary consumers in our oceans. Large blooms of Cnidaria and Satanophores have a pronounced impact in the local cycling of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, among other nutrients. Due to the opportunistic reproduction and conspicuous nature of dense blooms, jellies may serve as the canary in the coal mine for shifts in trophic structure. With over 150 species of animals that are known to utilize jellyfish as a food source, we can expect to see population changes in higher trophic levels as well. It is admittedly difficult to see what the future may hold for jellyfish populations, but it is apparent that they have been more of an issue in the past few decades. The left graph shows how many years in the past decade that jellyfish were reported to cause disturbances in Japan by type. On the right, global maps of human impacts to ocean temperature and other marine impacts are qualitatively significant, especially along the coast. Looking into the future, environmental scientists and policymakers should focus on minimizing the anthropogenic drivers imposed on oceanic systems. In the case of this topic, we can look to reduce runoff-induced eutrophication and transportation of alien species to other parts of the globe. Bigger picture, we can focus on creating policy that will mitigate global-scale ocean and atmospheric temperature and circulation change. The issues that we have discussed here are only the beginning of what can be a much larger issue in the future. Only a few species of jellyfish are represented in the detrimental impacts and events that we have discussed. With thousands of other species of jellies, the problems that we see have the potential to be much larger in the coming decades. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and have come to realize that jellyfish blooms are only one of the many examples of how changes in global processes can manifest in local changes that may affect our daily lives.